Today we're going to use Reshuffle to process a queue of objects using AWS Lambda. This is a common task where you have an array of inputs and you want to end up with an array of outputs. You do this a lot when you're inputting or outputting data between systems. A great way to do this in the cloud would be to use something like AWS Lambda, where each Lambda function gets a payload as an input and outputs a result. But tracking all those Lambda and figuring out when the processing is done can be a hard job. That's where Reshuffle comes in. With Reshuffle, you can use an HTTP API trigger or any other trigger to start a script that will get the input array in and fire up an encoding a processing queue. When the queue is done and Reshuffle does the tracking for you behind the scenes. When the queue is complete, another script is fired up, and in our case, the script will send out a notification to Slack. Let's see how this happens. So here's our Lambda function. It's a very simple function. It receives a string and returns a lowercase version and an uppercase version of that string. In Reshuffle, we have a connections already set up to Lambda and to our HTTP endpoint and to Slack as well as to other systems. And we'll use a set of two scripts. This script will be fired up by our HTTP endpoint, basically get this array of inputs and send them to a Lambda queue. Let's see how this works. If we go in here and we run the scripts, we get a queue ID. This is the ID of our processing queue. And if your ears are sharp, you've already heard behind the scenes Slack going off and telling us that the processing is already complete. Here is the same ID that we used. We have inputs, the outputs, the number of invocations, and this nice picture that's telling us all our workers can now go and rest. The way this happens behind the scenes is that when this processing is done, Reshuffle is tracking this different jobs, each one of them fired up by a different Lambda. And when all of them are done, it fires up this other script, which in this case just prints out the QID to our console, but also sends out this notification to Slack. In this case, we use our Slack connector, so we were able to completely configure and customize how we want this message to appear. This is how Reshuffle makes it easy to handle Lambda and other systems in your environment. We can also use Reshuffle to invoke Lambda functions, to create new functions, to deploy code to functions, and many other things. You can check it out all here. If you go to Connections and Lambda, you have all the different triggers and actions available for a Lambda connector. I hope you enjoy this. I hope this is useful for you, and see you all next time.